Welcome to the Baboom Baboom podcast, your go-to source for expert tips on car stereo installation, vehicle wiring, and all things wiring related. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, we've got the advice to help you power up your ride. Get ready to crank up the volume on your knowledge and make your next wiring project a success.
All right, so today, let's dive into car audio. Specifically something, well, a lot of people think is about as easy as plugging in a lamp, right?
Yeah.
The wiring.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty common misconception, actually. You might get away with being a little bit messy with your wiring on a lamp, and it's no big deal, but car audio, totally different story.
Okay, so you're telling me my dream of grabbing some old speaker wire from the garage, maybe left over from the 90s, that's not good.
That's a recipe for disaster. It's like, think about it like this. It's like trying to water your garden with a leaky hose.
Yeah.
You might get some water to the plants, but it's not going to be pretty. And in this case, your speakers are the plants. And that sweet, sweet sound, that's the water.
That makes perfect sense. So where do we even begin? Our listener sent in this article from Baboom Baboom. It's called How to Properly Route Car Audio Wires. And they really, really stress planning.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about this? This applies to so many things, not just car audio. Starting any project with a plan, always a good idea. And this article really hits the nail on the head when it talks about mapping out your route before you even touch a single wire.
Yeah, because trying to untangle that mess after the fact, that's no fun.
Nobody wants to do that.
The article actually says that the shortest route for your wire means the least resistance. Less resistance, better signal. So think about it like two garden hoses, right? One short, one really, really long. That short one, that's the one that's going to give you that powerful spray.
Absolutely. Every extra inch of wire that you have, it creates a little bit of resistance, and that hurts your sound quality, especially over longer runs. So yeah, planning your route might seem kind of tedious, but it's going to save you a lot of frustration and rework later on.
Okay, so planning, check. Now let's talk about something that always makes me a little nervous.
Yeah.
Wire gauge. All those numbers, 18, 16, 14. It's like a secret code?
Yeah, it can seem that way, but it's actually simpler than you think. Lower the gauge, the thicker the wire. And the thicker the wire, the more power it can handle, without losing any of that signal strength.
So
think of it like water pipes, right? Thicker pipe, it can handle more water flowing through it. Same with wires.
makes sense. So like the article says, using a tiny wire for a powerful subwoofer is like trying to water your entire garden with a straw. It's not going to work.
Exactly. You need a wire that can handle those the power demands of your components. Now, this article, they recommend copper-clad aluminum wire, or CCA. For most people doing it themselves, that's going to be a good balance between, you don't want to break the bank, but you want good performance.
So we've got our plan. We understand this whole wire gauge thing. Now it's time to bring in the power.
Let's juice it up.
Section 3 of the article is all about the power cable, the lifeline of your car audio system.
Yeah, and like a lifeline, you got to make sure it's strong and secure.
So the article says connect directly to the battery, but with a fuse near the battery for safety.
Yeah.
Got to have that fuse. Then route it through the firewall. That's that metal barrier between the engine and where you're sitting, right? Mm-hmm. And keep it as far away from the signal cables as possible.
There's a really good reason for that. So that power cable, it carries a lot of current. And if it gets too close to those signal cables, it can actually create electromagnetic interference. So imagine that static you hear on a radio. That's kind of what we're talking about. It can mess with your sound.
So no power lines crossing the stream.
Exactly.
Got it. The article also mentions grounding the power cable. They say to a clean metal point on the car's chassis. What's that all about?
That's really important. Think of grounding as it's like a safety net, right? It gives any stray electrical current a safe path, a way to get back to the battery. And what that does is it ensures that, everything's electrically stable. But it also helps prevent any of those annoying hums or whines that you sometimes get in your audio, because nobody wants a side of whine with their music.
Speaking of things nobody wants in their music, let's move on to signal cables, which is, I guess, what carries the music, right?
That's right. Section 4 gets into RCA cables, and these are the cables that send the audio signal from your head unit, so that's your car stereo, to the amplifier. And basically, these cables are carrying the actual music, so any interference here is really bad news.
The article describes RCA cables as whispering secrets from the head unit to the amp. I love that analogy because any interference is like somebody's listening in and messing with your message.
Yeah, and that interference, it can come from anywhere. Electromagnetic fields from the power cable, other electrical stuff in your car, even radio waves.
Need top-quality electrical wire? Baboom Baboom's got you covered. Get your 6-pack today. Each combo comes in 6 different colors and a total of 600 feet of wire. Perfect for any project, and you won't find a better price in the industry. Head over to baboombaboom.com now to snag yours. That's baboombaboom.com.
So it's like you got to be really careful where those RCA cables go.
Yeah, it's all about separation. Keep them away from that power cable, almost like it's a high voltage power line or something, And you got to route them carefully through the car, too. The article really stresses that.
Makes sense. You don't want to run a garden hose through a bonfire. You want to keep those RCA cables away from any heat or anything that could damage them. And I'm guessing you also want to make sure those connections are nice and tight.
Absolutely. Any loose connections or corrosion, that can mess with your signal quality, too.
It's all these little things. It's crazy how these little things can make a big difference.
They do. It's all in the details.
All right, so we've covered the power cable. We've covered the signal cables. What's next?
Speaker wire.
Right. Section 5, time to deliver the goods. Those are the wires that go from the amp to the speakers, right? Like the final runner in a relay race.
Exactly. And you don't want that runner tripping over any obstacles.
So no kinks, no bends, no pinching those wires.
That's what the article says. You get it. Any obstruction in those wires is going to affect how the sound comes out. Could even damage the wires.
And I think I remember the article mentioned something about matching polarity. What is that?
Right. So when you're connecting those speaker wires, positive goes to positive, negative goes to negative. Think of it like plugging in a lamp. You wouldn't plug a lamp into the wall backwards, right?
Definitely not. Don't want any electrical mishaps. Okay, so we've got our plan, our wires are routed, we've checked our polarity, everything's good. What's next?
Time for the moment of truth. Testing.
It's like the sound check before the big concert. Section 6 of the article talks about this. You don't want any surprises when you turn the music on. They mention listening for distortion. What does that even sound like?
So distortion can sound like crackling, popping, kind of a muffled sound. But honestly, listen for anything that sounds weird, anything unusual, buzzing, humming, whining. Any unwanted noise could mean something's not right.
So it's like being an audio detective,
Yeah.
You're really listening for clues.
That's a good way to put it. And it's much easier to fix these problems before you button everything up.
Makes sense. So really take your time in that testing phase.
Your ears will thank you.
It's amazing all this stuff that goes into getting good car audio. It seems overwhelming, but this article did a good job laying it all out.
It's true. And what's so cool is that a lot of these things, they don't just apply to car audio, right? Planning your route, this whole wire gauge thing, avoiding interference. These are things that, like, if you're doing any kind of DIY project, especially with electronics, these are important.
It's like learning a new language, the language of electricity.
Right. And once you know the language, you can start to do all sorts of cool things.
So whether you're setting up a home theater, putting in some new lights, or, tackling your car audio, these principles,
Yeah.
they apply.
Totally. So we've covered a lot with this car audio article. Speaking of other projects, our listener actually included a few other things, some interesting stuff from other areas. And I'm kind of curious, too, to see how it ties in.
Yeah.
So they send in this excerpt. It's from a bread making book. It's called Flour, Water, Salt, Yeast. And it's talking about how important time is in the bread making process. Like, if you rush the fermentation, you end up with this really dense, kind of flavorless loaf of bread.
So are you saying that, like, if you rush the car audio installation process, it's also not going to turn out so great?
Exactly. Just like you need to give that bread dough time to rise and develop those complex flavors, you've got to respect the process with the car audio too. Taking your time, making sure everything's right, it leads to a much better result. If you rush it, it's just not going to sound as good.
So patience is key, whether you're working with dough or wires.
I like that. And attention to detail, that matters too in both cases. Just like a baker carefully measures their ingredients, kneads the dough, a car audio enthusiast, they've got to pay attention to the wire routing, make sure those connections are clean, all those little things, they make a difference.
Well, so what else did our listener send in?
This next one is interesting. It's an article from National Geographic about monarch butterflies, specifically their migration patterns.
Okay, now this one has me stumped. How does that relate to car audio?
All right, so just bear with me for a second. This article, it was describing how these tiny creatures, They navigate thousands of miles, right? They use their instinct, they use the stars, even the Earth's magnetic field, all while dealing with crazy weather and, predators trying to eat them. It's incredible.
That is pretty wild. It's like they're following these invisible pathways to get where they're going.
And that's kind of like what we're doing with those car audio wires, right? We're creating these pathways for the sound to travel on. All those carefully planned and routed wires, they're like these invisible highways that guide the audio signals to their final destination, your speakers.
So we're not just shoving wires in willy-nilly.
Definitely not. You want it to be nice and neat.
We're creating order out of chaos. We're creating pathways for the sound to travel on.
Yeah, and think about it. If you've got this tangled mess of wires, it's going to disrupt that flow. Just like if a monarch butterfly is trying to fly through a bunch of tangled branches, it's not going to get very far. So it really highlights how important it is to plan those routes and do it right.
It's like I'm starting to see these connections everywhere now.
Yeah.
All right, what else do we have?
Okay, so shifting gears one more time, let's talk about architecture. Our listeners sent in this excerpt from The Architecture of Happiness by Elaine de Button.
Architecture. Okay, this is getting interesting. What wisdom can we glean from the world of buildings?
Well, this excerpt was talking about how the spaces we're in, they actually have a huge impact on us, our moods, our thoughts, even our relationships.
Wait, so you're saying that a well-designed building can actually make you happier?
That's what this book is arguing. And, it kind of makes sense if you think about it. If your house is a cluttered mess,
Yeah.
it's stressful, right? But if everything is neat and organized and well-designed, you just feel better.
I can see that. So how does this relate to car audio?
Well, think about your car. When your car audio system is just a jumbled mess of wires, it's kind of like that cluttered house. It's this underlying source of frustration.
Okay, yeah. But when the system is installed cleanly, all the wires are nice and neat, it just fades into the background. You don't even think about it.
Exactly. It's almost like it becomes part of the car itself. So what I'm getting at is that a well-executed car audio installation, it's not just about the sound, it's also about the visual appeal. It's about creating the sense of calm and order inside your vehicle.
So by taking the time to do it right, we're not just installing car audio components, we're creating this sanctuary of sound. It's a way to escape the chaos of the outside world.
I love that. It's like your own little concert hall on wheels. Okay, one more thing our listener sent in, and then we'll wrap things up.
All right, hit me.
This one's from Psychology Today, and it's about setting boundaries.
Boundaries. Interesting. I'm sensing a theme here with all these different things.
Right. So this article, it's talking about how important it is to set healthy boundaries in our lives. It's about learning to say no, protecting your time and energy, not letting people walk all over you.
Yeah, we've all been there. But how does that apply to car audio? Yeah, we've all been there. But how does that apply to car audio?
Well, think about it like this. Just like in our lives, we need those boundaries between, say, work and our personal life, our car audio systems. They need boundaries between the different components to prevent that interference we were talking about earlier.
So all that stuff about keeping the power cables and the signal cables separate?
Exactly.
That's like setting boundaries.
Think of it like giving each component its own space to do its thing minimizes the chance of any unwanted interactions, just like in our own lives, right?
It's amazing how these principles, they just keep popping up.
Isn't it fascinating? It's like this universal language of order and efficiency.
So after this deep dive, I think our listener is ready to install some car audio.
I think so too. They've got all the info. Now it's just about putting it into practice.
And hey, remember, have fun with it.
Right.
It's your project, your car. Put on some music, take your time.
Yeah, enjoy the process. And when you're cruising around listening to that awesome, clean sound system, you're going to be glad you put in the effort.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe you'll even start setting better boundaries in your own life. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Until next time.
Need top-quality electrical wire? Baboom Baboom's got you covered. Get your 6-pack today. Each combo comes in 6 different colors and a total of 600 feet of wire. Perfect for any project, and you won't find a better price in the industry. Head over to baboombaboom.com now to snag yours. That's baboombaboom.com.